Welcome to Spicer and Company. Happy Friday. I'm Sean Spicer.
And I'm Lindsay Keith. Yes, happy Friday, Sean. Well, unfortunately, the arrest in Louisville, Kentucky continued in the past 24 hours. And police say the protesters broke business windows, Sean, damaged city buses, and tried to set fire and threw flames into the street. And this is, all after only one police officer was charged in the deadly and unfortunate shooting of Breonna Taylor. And last night, dozens of people were arrested, including a Kentucky state representative.
Yeah, Lindsay, the two police officers who were shot during the protest are thankfully expected to make a full recovery. But it goes to show how things are just getting out of control. We talked about how Breonna Taylor's parents said that this is not what she wants. And as we head into a weekend, unfortunately, you got to wonder where this thing goes. But there was a 9 p.m. curfew last night, and that's been extended, hopefully, to settle some of this unrest.
Yeah, hopefully it will quell some of the unrest. And to your point, this is not, we mentioned this yesterday, this is not what the family of these victims wanted. And this is unfortunate situations, but it doesn't mean that there should be this type of unrest. That doesn't, in the end, solve the issue.
Yeah, and you just don't know how many more cases can we take, right? I mean, this is happening and you don't know where the next thing is going. But violence is not the answer for these things, and that's what we've got to stop. But beyond that case, right, the Democrats are also threatening to retaliate against Trump's Supreme Court pick, and the media is now all up in arms about the president's comments regarding the peaceful transfer of power after the next election. Well, who better to weigh in on all of this? Professor Emeritus at Harvard Law School, author of Guilt by Accusation, Newsmax analyst, and the brand new host of The Dersh Show, a brand new podcast, is Professor Alan Dershowitz himself. Sir, it's time to put it's time to put my law school class back into session here so I learn a thing or two, right?
I've already given you the A+, so you don't have to worry, just based on your past performance.
Thank you, Professor. I wish college was like that. All right, let me start with Breonna Taylor. I know you discussed this yesterday on your podcast. People talk a lot in the media and say, we want justice for Breonna Taylor. She was tragically killed by a stray bullet that this officer fired. So let me ask you this. Legally, who is responsible for her death?
Well, legally, there's most likely no crime committed at all. The police acted in reasonable self-defense by firing back at somebody who shot at them. It turns out perhaps to be just a terrible tragedy. The man who shot at them may have thought it was an intruder. We don't know. There are contradictory witnesses on that. But the police, under the law, are entitled to shoot back. Obviously, they should try to shoot the person who shot at them. In this case, tragically, they didn't hit him. They hit an innocent bystander, but that happens. And unless what they did was reckless, and they could be indicted for reckless disregard, as the other officer was for shooting into the other family premises, there is no homicide case. There's no murder charge here. There's no second-degree murder charge.
So then you only have a civil, you can only go after them civilly, right? So, which they did. They got $12 million from the city of Louisville. But in that particular case, when that kind of thing happens, you only have civil recourse. Is that right?
Generally, I mean, they could have been indicted perhaps for recklessness, but that would be a stretch, and you don't want to discourage the police from shooting back. I had a very close friend, a police officer, who waited to shoot back while he went to a domestic disturbance, and the perpetrator shot him first, and eventually he died of his wounds. Police officers are people. They want to go home to their families. They're scared. It's the middle of the night. If you want to blame someone, perhaps the judge who issued the no-knock search warrant.
Okay, that's where I want to go with you. So this no-knock warrant is used, and pardon my ignorance, legally speaking, that's why I want you to correct me here. But so they get this no-knock warrant, so they don't want to give the person that they're going after a heads up that they may be coming. Well, they got it wrong, right? So should someone be held accountable who screwed up the address or whatever it was? Should that person be held accountable?
Well, unfortunately, the Supreme Court has held that judges are totally immune if they make mistakes. Look, the question people are entitled to ask is, would a no-knock warrant be granted if this were a white middle-class or upper-class community and they were looking for cocaine? Or was the no-knock warrant granted because it was an African-American community? That's a legitimate question. What's not really a legitimate thing to do is to go on the street and protest because the Attorney General, under the law, made what was probably the only correct decision he could make. You don't indict people to please the crowd. That is not justice for anybody. And the Bible says justice must be pursued. Why is justice repeated? Because there must be justice for the victim, but there also must be justice for the accused. And we have to do both. And in this case, they may contradict each other, but
Right.
you place justice for the accused under our Constitution above justice for the victim.
So let me switch gears for a second. The Trump campaign is catching heat, President Trump in particular, in this case, for this discussing his reluctance to maybe accept a peaceful transfer of power if he were to lose the election. There's a headline, a story out that says the Trump campaign is reportedly discussing contingency plans to bypass election results. Now, Professor, every campaign gears up for a legal battle, right? There's a difference.
Yeah.
What the Democrats and the media are all up in arms is whether or not the president's willing to say, if I lost fair and square. I think there's a big difference between losing fair and square and saying, hey, I lost, but we don't know about these ballots in Pennsylvania or Nevada or wherever because Democrats changed. So where's the line here between legitimate, like a peaceful transfer of power before you know the results? And what does the Constitution lay out to ensure a peaceful transfer of power?
Well, the line is Bush versus Gore. Al Gore did not accept the results of the election. Hillary Clinton urges Biden not to accept the results of the election until they've exhausted all legal remedies. It's perfectly appropriate to go to court and to have the court decide the case. Once the Supreme Court decides, you have to accept it. And I think the president would. Other Republicans are saying the president would. The problem is going to be, what if there's a 4-4 decision of the Supreme Court? What if either we don't get a ninth justice, or the ninth justice recuses herself and says, look, I was picked recently by the litigant in the case, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to cast the deciding vote. That's the nightmare scenario that we face. But if the Supreme Court were to decide the case, even if they decided along partisan lines, the way they did in Bush versus Gore, I believe every presidential candidate would accept the ruling of the Supreme Court. And the American people and the Republican Party would demand that that be done. So I'm not as concerned as some of my Democratic friends are about somehow the president not giving up his office. As McConnell said, on January 20th, if the president loses the election and the Supreme Court says he's lost, he's moving out.
Yeah, I think that this is a lot about nothing. The president, you're right. The rest of the country is going to accept it. The military accepts it. And they're just trying to do this. The president's not going to concede anything before he has to. I want to ask you one last question before you go. There's a member of Congress from California, Ro Khanna, who tweeted out, we need term limits for the Supreme Court. Every president should have an equal chance to appoint justices. Our entire democratic system shouldn't hinge on the shoulders of individual Supreme Court justices. So that's one of the tactics they're using. They're talking about packing the court, adding additional members. In order to do any of these things, whether it's term limiting justices, adding additional members, is the process to do that literally just like passing a law? The House proposes it, the Senate agrees. How would it work?
No. In order to end the lifetime appointment of presidents, you'd have to amend the Constitution. The Constitution says justices shall serve during good behavior. I'm in favor of term limits. I think the 20-year term is good. I'm not in favor of mandatory retirement. That would just incentivize presidents to pick the youngest possible people so that they can be appointed at 30 and serve until 80 for 50 years. That's no good. But a 20-year term limit makes a lot of sense. You need to amend the Constitution. To pack the court, you don't need to amend the Constitution, but the people would not stand for it.
Okay. Well, once again, I learned everything I need to know through these segments. So I just saved myself whatever it costs now at Harvard, like $60,000 a year, by talking to you.
And you wouldn't even get professors talking to you directly. It would be virtually on the video. So you're getting the same thing.
Yeah.
Here.
No, I'm getting better. This is better. I get you.
You'll get my bill in the morning.
Oh, geez. Well, I think you just have to subscribe to the podcast. Anyway, Professor, thank you once again for being us. Have a great weekend.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Once again, by the way, he's the author of Guilt by Accusation, brand new podcast out. Go check it out. It's cheaper than a Harvard education at law school. All right. Our Religious Vote series continues today. We're going to talk again about the Catholic vote. Former acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, he's also the co-chair of Catholics for Trump. He's going to weigh in on the impact that the Catholic vote could have on the election. Plus, David Rubenstein, he's going to be here to talk about his new book on leadership. It's really cool who he talks about. You're going to want to see this. Then the company quiz is out today, and we've got some questions that might even stump you. All that and a lot more ahead on Spicer and Company.